Hello and welcome to Keeping the Peace. I'm your host, Vince Velazquez. A lot has happened in the past week, and as we continue to see mass protests around the country surrounding the murder of George Floyd, we have also seen police officers using force that many are calling excessive. Such was the case in Buffalo last week. Let's take a look.
He's bleeding out of his ear. He's bleeding out of his ear. Get him medic. What the fuck you walking up on me? I'm moving down. Get the fuck away. Y'all don't want this shit. Back up. Get off the steps. Let's go. Get back. Get back.
Better get an ambulance for him.
We have EMT on scene.
Joining me today is Jackie Patterson, former police officer, former police chief, and now longtime criminal defense attorney. Welcome to the show, Jackie.
Good morning, Vince. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
That video is a tough thing to see, and as you know, I've watched it several times. I know you have as well. We're looking at an elderly gentleman basically being pushed down. You come from a very unique background, and I'm really interested to hear your perspective because you've been on both sides of this coin, Jackie. You were a police officer, so at one point in life, you were a practitioner, then you were a police chief. You had people who you had to manage, and now for many, many years, since the early 90s, you've been a criminal defense attorney. So two questions here. How are police supposed to act in a situation like this? And then if you were the defense attorney representing one of those two officers arrested for this, what would the defense be?
Well, first of all, in a situation like that, a police officer has to have what's called real restraint. As a police officer, you're supposed to be able to know how to exercise restraint. In that particular video, these officers had no reason whatsoever, no lawful reason, to push that elderly person down. And if you notice, look how many police officers walked past him before anyone came to his aid. That is a major issue for me. On your second question, that if I was defending one of these police officers, you would have to argue that, first of all, this was in the midst of chaos. You've got a riot going on. And I would argue that pushing him down or him falling was certainly not intentional and that it was an accident. I would argue that when I pushed him, I had no idea he was that frail and that he would lose his balance. That would be my argument, that it was an accidental situation and no criminal intent.
Good point. But let me just kind of pose something different. I've had mass arrest training, and one of those segments of training is when you are in a line. I've been a longtime police officer, retired, and you're in an assembly or protest. Typically, arrest teams are behind the line. What I've been trained in the past is if you have to make an arrest, literally you reach through the line and you pull that person back. From what I see here, obviously we see the officer pushing the elderly gentleman forward. When we know what happens next, he falls back, hits his head. You know, but police officers historically are a group of people who basically look for support amongst each other. And this is no different. These officers were arrested, and there was a crowd to greet them when they came out of court. Let's take a look.
This happened just in the last hour. Two police officers were charged with felony assault during a protest in Buffalo, and they were applauded by their colleagues as they left the courthouse. Officers Robert McCabe and Aaron Torgalski pleaded not guilty. They were released without bail.
I mean, I understand when I see the video, police officers feel a sense of camaraderie. There are firefighters in this video. Also, they're supporting the police officers. And many times, Jackie, I know for a fact, even when officers, it's been proven that they did something wrong, they don't really believe it. They were trained a certain way. And really, my opinion is from the top down, there's lack of support. Clearly, the Buffalo Police Department, they are supporting these two officers. and I know there's no question about it. No one wants or is good with what happened to this elderly citizen. But when you now start to see police officers more and more being arrested, criminally charged, this is a game changer. This is a game changer like nothing I've ever seen. You're a criminal defense attorney. Like, this is really something, and you make some good points about how you would defend this. This isn't the only case. We've had officers all over the country recently arrested for assault on protesters.
Keep in mind, we haven't had these type of rioting since the civil rights days back in the 60s. So what we're seeing now is really unprecedented for many, many decades. So we have to understand that police officers, they live in what's called a fraternity. They look after each other. But we're in a time today where accountability must be had. And that's why these police officers were arrested. But it doesn't change the fact that police work is really a fraternity. You're trained a certain way. You're trained to look out for each other. Unfortunately, we live in a time now where systematic racism and police brutality is so rampant. The death of George Floyd made it a worldwide situation. Keep in mind, racism alone is a pandemic.
Good point, Jackie. I couldn't agree with you more. And we're talking about things that are really, really coming to light now, training. And we're talking about what type of training we possibly could be looking at. On one hand, we are hearing people rallying for defunding police. On the other hand, we are asking for more training. If you're taking money away, how do you pay for the training? That's a problem. What do you think about that?
Well, I can't ever imagine defunding the police. I think that's a ludicrous thought. We need the police, but we need proper police training. I think what needs to be funded is the mindset of the police. That is the key, which means you got to have psychological interviewing before the officer is ever brought on the department. When I was hired as a police officer, you were never hired until you saw a psychologist to determine that you were fit for police work. I don't have any idea whether they still have psychological tests for police officers, but that is absolutely critical. You have to fund the mindset, not defund the police department.
Great point, Jackie. And to that point, I'd love to see police departments giving psychological exams semi-annually. Let's not wait until a shooting situation or death in custody, because as you know, before an officer can return back to duty, they have to be cleared by a psychologist. Yet, where are the checks along the way? When are we seeing police officers seeing a psychologist 6-month mark to see if they're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or they somehow develop some implicit biases that may affect their ability to do their job? These are things that we are definitely trying to do. Protests all over the country are rallying to defund and even dismantle police department. What exactly does that mean? When we come back from break, we'll get into it. Welcome back. Protesters have been calling defund police departments all over the country. And what exactly does that mean? Get rid of the police altogether or shift resources somewhere else? Late night talk show host John Oliver had a lot to say about this. Let's take a look.
Finally, defunding the police absolutely does not mean that we eliminate all cops and just succumb to the purge. Instead, it's about moving away from a narrow conception of public safety that relies on policing and punishment and investing in a community's actual safety net, things like stable housing, mental health services, and community organisations. The concept is that the role of the police can then significantly shrink because they are not responding to the homeless or to mental health calls or arresting children in schools or really any other situation where the best solution is not someone showing up with a gun. That is the idea behind defund the police if you actually listen to it.
Man, I just love John Oliver, by the way. This guy, he really calls it like he sees it. So, Jackie, he made some really good points. You were a cop. I'm retired, longtime law enforcement professional, but I've always asked myself in my entire career, as police officers, why are we addressing homelessness? issues? Why are we as police officers addressing juvenile delinquency issues in schools? Why are we addressing drug dependency calls? Why are we addressing mental health issues? So I'm going to kind of go back and forth a little bit on this. I know people are calling to defund and disband police departments, but I think some of this responsibility falls on cities and municipalities. Police officers have been tasked with these jobs that are, in my opinion, should not even be law enforcement related duties. There should be people, mental health counselors that are dealing with patients, drug dependency centers that people can go to. Because we all know when police officers show up, things can go south very bad. For a disruptive student in a classroom, a school resource officer to come in there and physically remove a student, is that really the job of a police officer?
Well, unfortunately, Vince, there's no one else available to do that job. Let me explain. Since the beginning of time, for an example, we've always had mental illness. People have always suffered from mental illness. But think about it. If you have a child at school who's in the 8th grade who suffers from mental illness and starts attacking his teacher, who else is going to respond to try to quell that situation? It has to be the police. The police job, in so many cases, may start out as a social issue, but it turns into a law enforcement issue. And there's no way to avoid that. If you have a situation where a mother calls the police on her son who's acting erratically, although no crime has been committed, it doesn't mean that that son can't escalate and pull out a knife and stab his mother. That turns into a law enforcement issue. And that's why when police arrive on the scene on these social issues, it turns into a confrontation, because sometimes it escalates where the person who the police is being called upon has escalated to a criminal level and the police has to take action. So yes, there's no one else, Vince, that can do the job of a police officer. That's why they're still doing it.
Well, we certainly can't agree that there are instances when police officers respond and a criminal act has not taken place yet, and then it escalates from there. Because Jackie, I mean, I was a career cop. I love my job, and I have very, very good friends, men and women, who do this job every day, and they're great officers. But there's always that one guy or that one girl that makes things go south. We've seen it. So for the sake of argument, I like your point, but I think there's two sides to that. Also, when we think about what's going on in Minneapolis, we have recently seen where the city council has voted to dismantle the police department, literally get rid of the whole police force. Now, we've seen this before in 2013 in Camden, New Jersey. They did a similar thing. They disbanded their police force. But ironically, the county took over. They doubled the size of their force. Camden, New Jersey being a population that's 95% minorities. Something interesting happened. By the next year, complaints of excessive use of force dropped by over 90%. What's that model? How is that working there? And what can we do to even emulate that, if that's even possible?
Well, I certainly disagree with dismantling the police department, but I do agree with simply getting rid of the bad apples, because in every profession, it doesn't matter if you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer, you're going to have individuals that's going to cross the line and violate the law and do bad things. That doesn't mean everybody that's in the profession is a bad person. So I disagree with getting rid of the Minneapolis Police Department. I simply agree with getting rid of those officers who cannot protect and serve, and the ones that violate the civil rights of innocent people. I do not agree with dismantling the actual police department. Certainly the county sheriff can handle the case, but I don't see any need for that, because the issue is not the police department. The issue is the certain individuals within the police department that who's bent on violating civil rights.
You know what? You make a good point. Certain individuals, and I'd be remiss if I don't mention the fact that when these protests started, we have a leader of our country who says when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Now, when you talk about police departments that are already in trouble and already having difficulty maintaining a relationship with a community, that doesn't help. So there's so many things happening in this country, not just the George Floyd case. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about Breonna Taylor out of Louisville. We know that on March 13th, 26-year-old Breonna Taylor was shot and killed by police who were serving a no-knock warrant at her home. And we know no-knock warrants have been the subject of much controversy over the years, and many people advocate for doing away with them altogether. Let's have a listen.
911, Operator Harris, where is their emergency?
I don't know what's happening. Somebody kicked in the door and shot my girlfriend.
Okay, where are you located?
I'm at Springfield Drive, apartment 4.
Springfield Drive, apartment number 4?
Yes. Oh my God.
Okay, how old is your girlfriend?
She's 26. Breathe. Oh
You said 26. Where was she shot at?
I don't know. She's on the grill right now. I don't know.
Okay.
Mama.
You said she's 26. Is she alert and able to talk to you?
No, she's not. Breathe. God.
Okay, and you said you're in apartment number 4?
Hell! Oh my God! Yes, hell!
What's your name, sir?
Oh, my name is Kenneth Walker.
You said Kenneth?
Hell!
And you said she's 26?
Yes.
Okay, you said Springfield Drive, apartment number 4?
Yes.
Okay. Can you check and see where she's been shot at?
I can't get on her stomach. No,
Okay. Is she alert and able to talk to you?
No, breathe.
Okay.
I think she's oh my God. What the fuck? Oh my God.
Can you get her turned over on her back? I need you to check her and see where she's shot at.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I gotta go, Mama.
Okay.
I gotta get you back.
Kenneth, can you hear me?
Jackie, that's hard to listen to. As we know, Breonna Taylor was a 26-year-old woman trying to make it. She was an EMT working as a first responder herself, and that particular call is her boyfriend on the phone with 911. Something interesting he says on the phone. He doesn't say the police kicked in my door, bad guys kicked in. He said someone kicked in my door, and obviously he's full of emotion. He realizes his girlfriend Breonna is dead. Without saying so, he knows that she's not breathing. And we're talking about no-knock warrants. I have participated in no-knock warrants, and I understand the reasoning for them. And there's argument on both sides. So let's start with, people who are advocating to completely do away with that. You have defended people who have been in places where the police search for no-knock warrants. I know that for a fact. And I've even caught up with one of your cases, pretty good defense cases. Inherently, it's dangerous when police officers go to a door to serve a search warrant. We don't know what's inside, but on the other side of the thing, there is some intelligence that police officers do, homework, so to speak. If you were looking at a case like this, and Jackie, we've had our own share of controversy with no-knock warrants with a victim in Atlanta, Katherine Johnson, an elderly female citizen that was killed by our department. With your experience as a police officer and a criminal defense attorney, just give an opinion on whether there's a need for it. And if we keep no-knocks, what do we do differently?
Let me tell you, Vince, I think no-knock warrants now are the most dangerous things that we could potentially have. And let me tell you why. I think we need to do away with no-knock warrants for a couple of reasons. One is that the person on the inside of the house has no idea that it's the police coming in. And that's why you had the situation with Breonna Taylor. So if you do away with the no-knock warrants, then the police is going to argue, well, hey, look, it's dangerous because if we announce ourselves, then someone may start shooting at us through the door or get rid of evidence by putting drugs in the toilet. They could come up with a number of reasons for that. But you got to remember, life is precious. So therefore, if you do away with the no-knock warrants and the police is required to knock on the door, if someone starts shooting at the police after they announce themselves, then the police will be justified in returning fire, and whatever happens will be considered self-defense. But just to knock in somebody's door without any warning whatsoever, and they have no idea that the police is coming, you always end up with the Breonna Taylor type situations where people are killed not knowing, thinking it's a burglar or somebody just forcing their way in to do harm. I believe it's time to do away with the no-knock warrants, because it is better to have safety when a police officer knocks on your door, because in most cases, when someone say, I'm the police, not many people will shoot through a door and try to harm the police. They may be afraid of getting arrested. They may put the drugs in the toilet, but that is better than an innocent person being killed.
No doubt, Jackie. And, you know, just thinking about, like, if I'm home and I hear my door just being, you know, just damaged, just being beaten down, even if I heard someone say police, I don't know what I would do, to be quite honest with you. And that's me coming from a law-abiding citizen. I don't know all the details about this particular case. There's information that's come out that perhaps the information was not as accurate as they thought it would be. There was some type of narcotics associated with the probable cause for this warrant. But inherently, it is dangerous. When you think about that, someone breaking your door in, we are in our castle. You know, we are in the sanctity of our home. And you can hear the stress in his voice, Jackie. You can definitely hear it. Real quick, have you ever defended anyone who was a victim, so to speak, of a no-knock warrant?
Absolutely. And what generally happens in those cases, when I'm defending someone, let's say they ended up shooting the police, you know, throughout this no-knock warrant, your total defense is going to be, I was justified in protecting my home, not knowing who was coming into my residence. So a person should be convicted simply because they did not know it was the police coming in, and if they happened to shoot and injure the police. Unfortunately or fortunately,
that's right, Jackie.
You have the
all right, Jackie. We got it. Listen, we're getting to the end of our hour, half hour of the show. But thank you for coming on. We have a long way to go. We will be back tomorrow with more on keeping the peace. Thank you for tuning in.